Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, Thralls of Metal back again. I am Shredlord.
Necrotic Nick.
And we are here today to do a great album review, one I've been looking forward to. This is the new one from Dream Theater, and the reason it's important, it is the return of the king. Mike Portnoy returns back to his rightful throne behind Dream Theater's kit.
Parasomnia, the latest offering from this long-running progressive metal, staple. I'll call him a staple. Like, in terms of prog metal, like, if you haven't listened to Dream Theater yet, I feel like there's a lot of stuff you probably need to catch up on. This also comes out on the 7th of February on Inside Out Music. This band formed in 1988 in Long Island, New York. This is their 16th album overall. Again, the return of Mike Portnoy after his last album, which was Black Clouds and Silver Linings, back a long time ago. This one I have been legit kind of excited for. And it's not totally just because, Mike Portnoy returned, but it's mostly because Mike Portnoy returned. And that's not to throw any shade on Mike Mangini. I think that dude's an amazing drummer. It's just, it's Mike Portnoy.
Not only does he have an amazing drum style to him, he is vastly underrated as a composer and a songwriter. And I think his return to Dream Theater, adding that flavor back into the mix of songwriting, really showed through on this album.
Now with Dream Theater, all right, when it comes down to like a lot of their Mangini era, I don't necessarily hate it, except for The Astonishing. I do hate that. But there has been just sort of a missing quality. Like, they're kind of just doing Dream Theater by numbers, which, Dream Theater by numbers, you're still getting a ridiculous amount of, shreddy leads and crazy keyboards and wild transitions. Dream Theater, when it comes down to like delivering what they do, they're generally pretty much on point. But again, Mike Portnoy was sort of a missing ingredient. And honestly, with this album, I wasn't sure how immediately I would feel that, but it happened pretty damn soon. The opening track, In the Arms of Morpheus, while it is an opening suite, and honestly, we were jamming it. I was like, okay, this is kind of Dream Theater 101. Like, all right, Let's have a big opening suite. Let's just kind of do a sampler platter of all the things we do.
It even had almost like a opening clip of like Law and Order in the background. It had, throughout this album, you'll hear it, but it definitely starts this way as well, where you'll get these soundscapes that kind of sound like you're just standing in downtown New York or something. And, the low breeze, you hear people in the background. Hey, Detective Frank Rizzo, homicide. There I was, 4:30 in the afternoon down in the Bronx precinct.
New York's a tough, but also very progressive town. Lots of fills, lots of noodly riffs everywhere. I tell you, these guys, they know what they're doing. But the thing that I noticed right away, and honestly it carried on throughout, I would say a good chunk of this album, is this album has a darker tone, which has been large in part missing. In fact, I don't remember this band sounding this dark since Black Clouds and Silver Linings.
Coincidence? I think not.
No. But that leads into Night Terror, which was, I believe, the first single they released.
It was.
And, honestly, again, it's got this heavier vibe. And there's been a production change, at least here. Instead of, John Petrucci, I believe, who's been doing the majority of the production, I think. They've definitely had some outside help. I can't remember who did the last one. But Andy Sneap steps in. Now, generally, when I bring up Andy Sneap, it's either to praise his work in Sabbat, which is a fucking amazing thrash band, or to kind of low-key bitch about his production just because he never really changes it from band to band. We'll definitely hear that probably in the next Testament, next Overkill, Exodus, whatever. But here, it sounds kind of fresh because it's a very different kind of band here. And it doesn't sound like it's the same stock settings that he uses, namely because Petrucci definitely has a very particular tone that he goes for. The only thing that kind of has that Andy Sneap sound are the drums. But it works because the drums sound magnificent on here. Like, this sounds like, Mike's performing right in front of you in the room, and you are just there to essentially bow in its aura.
I like that they put Night Terror at number 2. Once you got through the Dream Theater suite that we were kind of all waiting for and accustomed to, Night Terror was good because it was a classic Dream Theater throwback song. And what I mean by that is it has a lot of these old school elements in it, Parts of it even touch back to maybe the Systematic Chaos era in reminding me of some of the riffs or some of the vibes per se. You had your classic start where you had the elongated start with the big slow fills of Mike Portnoy building up the anticipation. You had chaotic parts weaving in and out of each other. You had parts that shrank and grow. That's kind of like a Dream Theater thing. I remember watching an instructional video, a drum video actually, of Mike Portnoy saying that they would write sections, take 2 parts, shrink it, grow it, shrink it, grow it. I'm hearing some of that stuff, some of that old staples that were definitely staples when Mike Portnoy was in the band. And obviously, I've been a fan since I've been a little kid. I had Awake on cassette tape. For those of you that are old enough to remember cassette tapes, while it is an awesome nostalgic overload with Night Terror, this album doesn't live on nostalgia. It feels very renewed and very fresh.
Yeah, like there's an invigoration behind this and aggression. This honestly has, again, not only that darker vibe, but there's like more aggressive riffs on here. And, you know, it still has, of course, those token fun transitions, especially when this band gets down to the bridge. That's where the rule book gets thrown out. Night Terror's bridge is absolutely awesome. You get some like doomier moments, and then you get like just this insane shreddy moment. I call it Flight to the Petrucci Bee.
Well, yes.
It's literally every note that I think can be played in a span of a few seconds. You know, a day in the office for Petrucci. But again, like this album, there's like a fun flow to this. And while, you know, Dream Theater's main thing is like, I would say precision and songcraft and like blending all of these elements, there's a looseness to this. This feels fun, especially when they get down to the bridges. But there's also, again, a renewed love of heavy riffs. Like this is not just the Jordan Rudess Petrucci, you know, shred fest. There are a ton of riffs on here. Dead Asleep and Broken Man, honestly, 2 of the heavier cuts on here. Broken Man kicks off almost in like a metallic hardcore sort of fashion. You get those squawky alarm clock riffs. I didn't think I'd be making like a comparison to like Converge or anything like that with this album, but it was there. Like you get those like, you know, nasty rolls, and it's just a very aggressive start, and then you start bringing in like haunting synths. And Rudess, I have like this interesting relationship with in terms of like, I love his playing. That dude is insanely talented. But he overdoes stuff occasionally, and then it feels like you're kind of getting like sucked into a Disney score. Here, I feel like there's like a little bit of restraint, and he's kind of doing what like past keyboardists have done, like add more to the atmosphere, and then when he gets this moment to like do his incredible keyboard leads, he seizes it. It's not like so much keyboard work where it's all over the place. A lot of these songs, you get like good hooky verses, like just a solid meaty riff. Dead Asleep, dude, that main riff on there is a beast. Honestly, one of the biggest standout riffs I think I've heard from this band in a while.
Yeah, and there's still surprises in here as well, like little parts where you go, oh wow, really? And Broken Man would be a good example of that, because towards the end, there's a solo section, and what's funny is the solo section, it's got this heavy, serious vibe, and then it breaks down to this like blues rock jam. It felt like I took John Petrucci with me to my local bar, and he just stepped up in somebody's blues jam and just melted faces and then stepped off the stage, and we went home.
This bearded dude says he can play guitar. I play a little bit. You know, and then he just shreds everyone's faces off like, holy fuck, he's a sleeper.
But to hear like that weird kind of like a slow down to this blues rock part, those are fun surprises that Dream Theater definitely can be known for at times.
I feel like, again, like a lot of the more lavish, over-the-top stuff is saved for the bridge, and it's not like the entire song, which kind of a complaint about some of the like the more recent stuff where it's like, okay, this is like a really good but, you know, very outlandish, over-the-top thing, which I feel like you've done before. But here, again, like just this little bit of restraint goes a long way. And overall, like the feel of this album feels more focused, again, on songwriting rather than just showing off, which the band is good at both, for damn sure. But I feel like the focus on the last few, again, has been kind of like more showboaty.
Another song that kind of jumped out at me for being unique on this album was Midnight Messiah. Here's an example of what Nick was talking about with Jordan. There's a lot of like texture and layers, and instead of doing leads over top, sometimes it would be things like strings, or in this instance, it stood out to me because you have this very somber start, and the keys are doing like these Gregorian chant kind of, like to make it epic. There is an amazing John Petrucci solo on Midnight Messiah as well. I foolishly wrote that it would probably end up being my favorite solo of the album, but I was clearly mistaken, and it's not even close. That's saved for a track that we'll talk about later. But Midnight Messiah was kind of a more stripped down vibe, but what really also stood out to me was the fact that there is a heavy ass section in the middle of that song that really takes me back to the Train of Thought era of Dream Theater, notably the song As I Am. That riff, it just kind of bounces around with that heftiness, and it very much reminds me of that, and that's a very good thing. I love that album. Once again, it's not rehashed things, but it's things that's drawing me back to the past and reminding me, number one, who they are originally and why I loved them in the first place.
There's a good balance of like modern and throwback on here. And I think the throwback element definitely comes with Mike Portnoy. There's a lot more like sections of him just settling into grooves. Mangini, awesome drummer again. I felt like sometimes he was just like a little too busy. Mike Portnoy knows when to let the gas off and just kind of rock a groove, like do some like, cool stutters with the, double bass and such. But here bringing in like some more old school elements, like Midnight Messiah, the chorus out of nowhere takes a hard shift to thrash. Like honestly, feels more in common with something like Exodus or Overkill or any other band that Andy Sneap has worked with recently. But I like the fact that it's kind of like a rocker of a song, and then it kind of just gets unexpectedly heavy. And I will say that solo is absolutely awesome. And it's partially due to the fact that it's like a tapping harmony with Jordan. Like they're blending the keyboards and guitars at light speed, which I know like I've been listening to like, Dream Theater for any amount of years. Like,
that's nothing new.
That's nothing new. But they did it well again.
And what Dream Theater album would not be complete without a 20-minute track? That's right, folks. The very last track on this album, The Shadow Man Incident, is a 20-minute closer-outer, and I thought it was fantastic. It kind of touched on all the areas of this album, but it didn't recall a lot of the same musicality. Dream Theater sometimes will do a lot of recall stuff where they'll bring back in other melodies and redo them to kind of remind you of it, almost like a composer would when they're composing scores. But this was a little bit different. It took you through all the areas, or styles, I should say, that they brought to this album. Big, brooding, moody opening riff that's kind of slow.
Very Candlemass-ish.
Yeah.
I got big Candlemass vibes with that opening riff.
And that's cool. Once again, like, I don't think you would hear that before. Or like Nick was saying, like, when's the last time you heard just like a flat-out thrash drum riff in Dream Theater? It's been a while, and adding those different ingredients made that pop, and this ending track is absolutely no different.
It definitely has like a more brooding sense to start off. Like, it gets down to the verses, you get these clean melodies, but it's very haunting. A lot of, minor chords being played on this album. It has, again, like a more dark kind of vibe across the board. Like, yeah, you have your brighter choruses and blah, 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 and we'll get into that. But when this band decides to get heavy on this album, it is like legit really heavy. And, with a 20-minute song, of course that means there's a giant bridge that just spans every genre imaginable.
Of course.
And everyone's going buck nutty. This one actually has probably one of my favorite moments from Jordan Rudess, too. There's a flat-out, like, piano solo where dude, I swear to God, he's got 88 fingers to match the 88 keys. But that also transitions well into another brilliant, shreddy, disgusting Petrucci lead. And again, like, where, it would feel like more self-indulgent before, just because Portnoy's in the band again. This feels more like a fun jam session. And it kind of rekindled something that I really did like about Dream Theater, at least in the early days there.
On top of great musicianship, there was a hefty amount of atmosphere in this album. There was a lot of tracks that either started or ended with a lot of cinematic sound effects. We actually get a track that is basically like a segue into the last couple songs. Are We Dreaming? It has a very somber sound effect vibe. It recalled to me on the album Life is Killing Me by Typo. There is a track called Drunk in Paris.
Yep, I was going to say.
Yeah, dude, Drunk in Paris. And it kind of has that dark, somber vibe. I was literally waiting for Peter Steele's voice to come in and talk about his gigantic, monstrous 12-inch submarine sandwich that he probably purchased at a local deli in New York.
You get like some whispered voices in the background. It does feel like there's a London fog hanging over it. And, with this dark, somber vibe, yeah, this would be a track that I would skip. But it fits with it. And there's like moments like that that are kind of like scattered on here to kind of like build tension and such. But I figured that was kind of going into a more brooding, dark, heavy number. And then we get into Bend the Clock, which kicks off very melancholic. Honestly, I like the opening melody. It's got a bit of a 90s alternative kind of brooding, like a Soundgarden-ish almost. Like, all right, we'll see where it goes. And then it gets very ballady. And this is a point with Dream Theater that I have an issue with. Anytime that James LaBrie is in the driver's seat, I'm generally ejecting myself from the car.
When I first heard this track, I thought to myself, well, we couldn't escape this album without a ballad, and I was right. From the opening moments of the clean guitar, for all you old school Dream Theater fans, I definitely thought it was going to be like The Silent Man Part 2. It's going to be this, real sing-songy, clean acoustic-y song. And while it started out that way, it actually ended on an incredibly strong finish. Incredibly. This song, to me, could not have done more of a 180. After it starts that way, they finally start to pick up the pace a little bit, and it mounts into this epic, almost Pink Floyd ending with what would be the greatest John Petrucci solo on this album, I think. It is chock full of feel. The David Gilmour is just pouring out of his guitar. Everything just feels so beautiful and melodic and uplifting to listen to. I'm getting goosebumps just telling you guys about it.
Yeah, no, they're there.
It's an amazing end to this song. So while it started out with what Nick and I thought would be a lot of James LaBrie biting the apple, it actually turned into one of my favorite, the ending turned into one of my favorite moments on this entire album.
Honestly, and it doesn't feel like 100% a David Gilmour tribute. Like, that's definitely the main mode. He still peppers in, some light shredding, just some stuff that, just to remind you, I'm still going to, do my thing, too. But, man, the vibe on that, it's like a tribute to animals in just, a minute and a half section. Might have been 2 minutes. I don't know. It was the best section of the song. And honestly, one of my favorite moments on this album, on easily my least favorite track.
What a weird thing Dream Theater does to our brains.
And that does kind of circle back to one of my main issues, which I've alluded to. It's still James LaBrie. Now, I'll admit, back in the early days, James LaBrie was a hell of a singer. And then he damaged his voice, and it's been kind of a mixed bag since. And I have seen recent performances, Dream Theater, with Portnoy back in the band, and James has been struggling. A lot. And it's kind of noticeable on here, at least in terms of the takes. You don't hear him drawing out notes very much. There's a lot of reverb on it. I don't think there's, auto-tune. I mean, he definitely has, some effects on him and such. But you can definitely tell that, he's struggling to hit those higher notes a bit, and they're definitely using a lot of effects to carry him. And honestly, I've never been the biggest LaBrie fan. I've always described this band as a collection of some of the most brilliant musicians on the planet, and James LaBrie is also in the band too. But there are moments in here where he kind of feels out of his element. The chorus on Night Terror, honestly, I'm not the biggest fan of it. It's not just the lyrics and such, but just how he tries to make it brighter than it should be in terms of a song about, having nightmares. And while I love that thrashy DB chorus on Midnight Messiah, it comes out of nowhere. And it's just, tons of energy. He's not the right guy to be kind of, delivering vocals behind, such rowdy, raucous music. They should have got a guest spot from, Bobby Blitz on there. Totally would have worked. But yeah, James LaBrie, still an issue, but I will say that he did not ruin this for me. In fact, I haven't been this into a Dream Theater album since probably Systematic Chaos. And that was quite a while ago. I think it was 2007. 5? Fuck. Even longer.
As a lifelong Dream Theater fan, I definitely don't mind James LaBrie. He's always been a part of the sound, but I absolutely understand where people who aren't fans of his are coming from. And I also would be lying to you if I said I do not see, obviously, the deterioration in his vocals over the years. But I thought he did a good job on this album. I thought the down-tuned compositions definitely help vocalists, not have to be up in those crazy higher ranges as their voice deteriorates over time.
There's also sparing vocal sections. I don't say this isn't vocally dominated.
No, but I thought the parts that he does have all over this album did sound good. I do agree that they probably cut certain things short or did it in a certain way to appeal to the strengths of his voice at this part of his career. But I definitely think that he did a solid job on this album. Overall, I'm going to give this a 4.5. This is an excellent return to form of Dream Theater. The missing member is back. The missing brother is back. The chemistry is back. And that is incredibly apparent on this new release. It sounds natural. It sounds at home. It sounds comfortable and loose. And I think that allows them to be at their peak. And I think that the music speaks for itself when I say the rest of the members, I think, are excited to be back writing new music with Mike and getting back to work after a decade-long hiatus, basically.
I am honestly at a 4, a solid 4. And, I give the last one a 4. And in retrograde, I would probably maybe go like a 3.5. Like, I still think it's good. And rating this band and prog bands in general, it can be kind of tough because on one hand, like, well, you may not necessarily be in the style. There is a skill level that is associated with this style of metal that you kind of have to appreciate on some level, just in terms of like everything that goes into it. Again, all of these guys are awesome players, and James LaBrie is still in the band. But with this, I feel like the songs jump out again. Like, the composition is on it. And I feel like there's just more hooks to it. Like, this kind of has a lot of like old school flavors where they'll just sit on a riff for a while and kind of rock out. Like, they don't feel the need to just like overly fill a moment with like every possible weird transition or keyboard layer. There's a level of restraint that is exercised on here that I have not heard in quite some time. And everything feels like it really does serve the song again. I also appreciate the heavier, darker tone on here. That kind of makes a world of difference because I don't feel like I'm getting like swept into these like beautiful, bright anthems and, sing-songy things. Then it's still got its hooks, but again, like, it feels heavy again. And riffs. There are riffs on here that I will 100% remember. This doesn't feel like, just, John doing his thing. Like, no, he sounded inspired on here. Everyone did. Even James, maybe. But Portnoy being back, that's probably my favorite thing. Like, again, as a drummer, he's like one of my favorite drummers. The dude is just a fucking magician behind that kit. Like, every performance is a fucking clinic. I watched him do a Drumeo for a Taylor Swift song, and he absolutely owned it and had fun with it. And yeah, the dude's just one of the best. But yeah, this is honestly one of the best Dream Theater albums I have heard in recent memory. And it kind of still does everything that you expect from Dream Theater, but it does it at such a high level. And again, there's just a difference you can feel. So yeah, if you're a giant Dream Theater fan, you probably already know this. But I don't know if you've ever wanted to like just check out this band. Honestly, this wouldn't be a bad place to start. And then, work your way back, check out a lot of killer stuff. Awake, probably the goat of the bunch. That's my personal favorite. But yeah, way to go, Dream Theater. So, if you enjoyed this review, give it a thumbs up. And if you are new to the channel, subscribe because we do stuff like this all the time. We also have memberships. They're only 99 cents, and we do pretty much a members-only live stream as our lone perk. We're going to try to do them, like, about every month, and we're going to try to, like, figure out some different subjects to talk about. Or again, we could just do general chit-chat stuff where you guys ask us weird questions. We might ask you weird questions. And we know how to ask weird questions.
And I might talk Jammin' John into shoving a bunch of eggs up his ass.
That might not happen. There have to be some money involved.
I'll make them hard-boiled so it's less messy.
But yeah, memberships are the new way to support the channel more directly. We also still have our store with our hats and shirts that is linked down below in the video description. And of course, if you would like to become a member of this channel, there's a join button somewhere down here.
And last but certainly not least, thank you to each and every one of you that takes the time out of your day to spend with us and listen to us goofballs talk about one of our favorite subjects, and that is metal music. Without you, this would not be possible, and we could not be any more proud and happy with the community that we've built and the way we're going, so let's keep it going.
Yeah, you guys absolutely rule, and we're going to continue to keep overloading you with more content in the future. So one more big thank you because you guys are awesome, and we will catch you later.